Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Vaera. In our parasha, we have the classic meeting of Pharaoh and Moses. And I would say even most non-Jews know to quote the famous statement that Moses proclaimed to Pharaoh. So said Moses to Pharaoh, "Let my people go." And yet, if we actually look into our parasha, we will find that's not exactly what Moses said. If we look at, for example, in Perek Zayin, Pasuk Kavav, we find that God says to Moses, God says to Moshe, "Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, bo el Paro, come to Pharaoh, ve'amarta elav, and say unto him, Ko amar Adonai, so says God, shlach et ami, vayavduni. Let my people go, so they may serve me." During the 80s and the 90s, there was a big campaign to try and release the Jews of the Soviet Union. And unfortunately, there was a very complex story there. The Soviet authorities were very nervous of the Jews leaving, of Zionism as a whole, and they were very cruel to the Jews and locked them up, sent them to Siberia. Some of them very famous characters such as Natan Anatoly Sharansky and others, Ida Nudel. And the Jews around the world campaigned very strongly to try and release the Jews using the famous slogan, "Let my people go." And yet, when we come to the Psukim, that's not what it says. And I think this specific word that is tagged on along at the end, that we sometimes forget, Shlach et ami vayavduni, let my people go so they may serve me, actually is the key to the whole story. The French Revolution, and before that the American Revolution, were both inspired by the Old Testament, by the Tanakh. And we find explicitly many of the thinkers of the Enlightenment who set the groundwork for the ideas of liberty and freedom and equality and equality before the law and fraternity, the famous Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité of the French Revolution, or the Bill of Rights, the prelude to the independence, the Declaration of Independence of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All of these ideas were deeply inspired. And we, for example, find Locke himself, one of the fathers of the Enlightenment, quoting explicitly biblical values as the source for this. So the idea of trying to help people free themselves from bondage, to let people go, to fight against slavery, to fight against dictatorships and oppressive governments and systems of governance, these are all deeply rooted in the biblical stories. And yet the most famous of the biblical stories of the fight against oppression, which is our story here, the Exodus, the slaves in Egypt who are being whipped by the evil Pharaoh, is not actually that story at all. We will find throughout Sefer Nevi'im, we will find throughout the Bible all sorts of statements that definitely do support the idea of treat your fellow man like a human being, and ki b'tzelem Elohim bara et Adam, man is created in God's image. Every human has worth, and it's important to not afflict anyone, especially not your fellow brother or your fellow human. Yet the story of the story of Shemot, the story of Exodus, the story of the Jews in Egypt has another whole level, which I feel is very often lost, especially in today's world. We very often like to look at these battles between the people and the dictator, between the oppressed and the oppressor, in, I would even say, secular terms. There is a ben adam lechaveiro element. There is a fellow human morality line that is being crossed. It is not fair, it is not just to do such a thing to other people, to afflict, to oppress. And as such, fighting against that is fighting for justice, fighting for social justice, fighting for freedom, fighting for liberty. All of these ideas are ideas that I feel very strongly resonate in our modern day world. But in our story, in Sefer Shemot and in Parashat Vaera specifically, There's another element, which is the religious element. And that is an element which I feel this world is very much missing. The religious element is we do not want to be free from, as Rabbi Sachs says, but rather free to. It is not shalach et ami, let my people go so they may drink pina coladas on the beach, so that they can raise their own children and live free of want, to quote the civil rights movement. Freedom from fear, freedom from famine, freedom from hunger, freedom from pain. Rather, it is freedom to. It is to be able to fulfill our purpose. The reason why the Jewish people need to be released from Egypt is not because it is a moral evil. It might also be a moral evil. But the reason brought forth, sent by God, is because the Jewish people have a task. They have a goal. They have a role to fill. And if they are enslaved in Egypt, they cannot fill that role. The reason we want liberty and equality for all is not because there's a certain equilibrium that we want to uphold, and if people are oppressed, they cannot uphold that equilibrium. If that's the case, then all we're trying to do is get everyone to a place of neutrality, where they are not being oppressed, and they can have the freedom to do what they want, the freedom to, find the career they want, the freedom to have the family they want, the freedom to pursue whatever pursuits they may want. That is where the Western world is at the moment. But as many people very often feel, there is something missing. Ha'ikar chaser min hasefer. There is a certain piece which is not just moving from neutral, from negative to neutral, but rather from neutral to positive. How do we take us and take the society and the world that we live in to the next stage? Vaya'avduni. So that we may serve a higher purpose, so that we may serve God. Serving God, people often think, is something very personal, something very like kind of my relationship with the divine. No, it's a societal thing. Do we have a goal? Do we have a focus? Do we have something which we believe in? Do we have something which we are aiming towards? Do we have a role to play in history, in society, in the universe? Why are we here? That is the idea of belief in God. God is the answer to the whys of the world. Where are we heading? Why are we heading? What do I want from my own life? Why am I alive? Why was the world created? All of these are not philosophical questions, they are theological questions. And the answer is always Vayavduni. The reason we want to leave Egypt is because we were created in this world for a reason. And to be slaves in Egypt is not that reason. We have a role to play in the nations, Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, a holy nation that has a message, that has a dream, a vision to share with the world. And if we are stuck in the bondage of Egypt, then we cannot fill that role. When people want freedom, very often they want freedom from. The question is, what do you do with that? People today have a lot of free time. Free time from, because we don't have to do the laundry anymore, we have washing machines. We don't have to do the dishes anymore, we have dishwashers. We don't have to walk and ride donkeys anywhere, we have planes and trains and automobiles. All of this is there to give us freedom, but freedom to do what? I feel like one of the biggest afflictions that the world today is facing is we don't know what to do. Now we have all the freedom. Now we have all of the economic freedom. We're not hungry anymore. More people today are dying of obesity than hunger. This is not an issue anymore. We don't need freedom from, we need freedom to. And if Be'ezrat Hashem we can follow this message from the Tanakh, we don't just leave Egypt because we left Egypt. Rather, we leave Egypt ki ani Hashem Elokechem, so that we can serve God, so that we can forward, so we can move forwards in the Tanakh, in the Chumash, to get to Har Sinai, to get to the Mishkan, to get to the land of Israel. That is the trajectory here. So I give everyone Be'ezrat Hashem a blessing this week, that we may find the reasons what we are heading for, the reasons why, the reasons where, the freedom from that will lead us to freedom to. And Be'ezrat Hashem, may we release ourselves from whatever bonds that we are currently impended by, so that we can truly fulfill our potential and strive. Shlach et ami v'yavduni. Shabbat shalom.